The cabin was old, paint chipped, dock half rotten, the kind of place you fix up because it feels like freedom. It sat right on the edge of the lake, tucked behind tall pines, with a little stretch of sand that caught the morning light just right. I bought it with the last of my savings, hoping for peace and quiet. What I got instead was the HOA from hell. On my second day there, a white SUV rolled up and parked crooked on my driveway. 3 people got out, clipboard in hand, name tags shining. The one in the middle was exactly what I expected. Karen. Tight bun, expensive sunglasses, and that expression like she smelled something she didn't like. She didn't even say hello. "Sir," she said sharply, "you're trespassing on HOA property. This beach is private." I blinked. "Ma'am, I bought this cabin. The deed includes the shoreline." She crossed her arms. "Impossible. This beach belongs to our community. You need to leave before we contact law enforcement." I could tell arguing wouldn't help, so I pulled out my folder and showed her the papers. "See this line?" I pointed at the map. "That's the property boundary. Everything past it, including this beach, is mine." Karen squinted, pretending to read. "Fake documents," she muttered. Then she looked over her shoulder at the others. "Call the cops. We'll let them handle it." I almost laughed, but I let her make the call. 10 minutes later, 2 patrol cars pulled up, lights flashing. Karen marched toward them like she owned the whole county. "Officers, thank you for coming," she said sweetly. "This man broke into our private beach area." One of the officers turned to me. "Sir, can we see some ID and property documentation?" I handed it over without a word. He studied it, then walked back to the car, typing something into his system. Karen was whispering to the other officer, smiling like she'd already won. Then the officer came back, holding a printout. "Ma'am, you might want to step aside. This entire plot, including the beach, was sold 30 years ago to a private owner. The HOA has no legal claim." Karen froze. "That can't be right. We've been maintaining this beach for years." The officer shrugged. "Then you've been maintaining someone else's property." The look on her face was pure disbelief, like her world had cracked right down the middle. She turned to me, voice shaking. "You don't understand. This beach belongs to the community." I smiled calmly. "Not anymore. It belongs to the guy holding the keys." The officers gave me a nod and told her to leave the property immediately. She stood there for a second, red-faced and silent, before storming back to her SUV. Gravel kicked up as she sped away, shouting something about calling her lawyer. I looked out at the water, sun reflecting off the waves. Peace was back, for the moment, but something in the way she said it made me sure this wasn't over. 2 days later, I was out fixing the dock when I heard that same white SUV engine rumbling again. I didn't even have to look up. I knew it was her. Karen stepped out with 2 men in polo shirts, both carrying clipboards and walkie-talkies. She didn't even bother with a greeting. "We're here for a mandatory HOA inspection," she said, striding right past my truck like it wasn't there. I straightened up slowly. "Inspection? Of what?" "Of our beach," she snapped. "You've been making unapproved modifications to community land." I stared at her for a beat, trying not to laugh. "Karen, you already called the cops. They told you this land isn't yours." She smirked. "That was a misunderstanding. We've since spoken with our legal counsel. Turns out this area falls under community maintenance, even if it's technically outside our jurisdiction." I raised a brow. "So, not yours, but you still think you can control it?" Her smile faltered, but she waved to her so-called inspectors. "Document everything," she barked. "We'll file a violation report." One of the guys started taking photos of my dock, my cabin, even my fishing gear. That's when I noticed something strange. One of them was wearing a badge. Small, plastic-looking, but a badge nonetheless. I walked closer. "You guys real inspectors?" I asked. The man stammered. We work for the HOA Compliance Board." I chuckled. "Funny, because I just called the county office last week.
There's no such thing as a compliance board for private lakes." Karen glared at me. "Stop interfering. You can't intimidate my staff." "Staff?" I said. "Lady, these guys are about to get arrested for trespassing." And right then, like perfect timing, a county truck pulled into view. The same officer from before stepped out, adjusting his sunglasses. "Morning, folks. Got a complaint from a homeowner about unauthorized activity on private land. That you, Mr. Miles?" "Yep," I said, folding my arms. "They're claiming an inspection." The officer turned to Karen. "You again!" He sounded tired already. "Ma'am, you were warned about this." Karen raised her chin. "We're within our rights to ensure community safety." The officer shook his head. "Not on land you don't own. And those two men?" He nodded toward the fake inspectors. "They've been flagged before, posing as county officials." Both men froze. Karen's face went blank. "No, they're volunteers!" she shouted. But it was too late. The officer was already radioing for backup. I leaned against my truck, calm as ever. "Told you, Karen, you don't own this beach. You're just sinking in the sand." Her jaw clenched. "You think you've won? You don't know who you're dealing with." The officer turned to her, hand resting on his belt. "Ma'am, we know exactly who we're dealing with. Step back, please."
The backup arrived fast. 2 more sheriff cruisers crunching down the gravel road, lights bouncing off the water. The moment those officers stepped out, the 2 fake inspectors dropped the act. One tried to slip away toward the SUV, but the deputy caught his arm before he could move. "Names," the lead officer demanded. "Let's start there." The taller one muttered, "We were just doing our job." "Your job?" the officer cut in. "According to the county, you don't work for any registered agency, so who hired you?" Both men glanced at Karen. She stood stiff, pretending not to notice, but the silence said everything. The officer turned toward her slowly. "Ma'am, did you authorize these men to enter private property and perform an inspection?" She straightened her blouse, voice shaking but defiant. I didn't authorize. I just invited them to assist. Community volunteers, that's all." "Volunteers with fake badges and stolen county paperwork?" he said flatly. "Because we just found a clipboard marked Code Enforcement Division, and it's got the county seal on it. That's a felony." Her mouth opened, then closed. The crowd was forming now, neighbors walking down from their homes, phones out, whispering to each other. This was their HOA president, the woman who'd fined them for mailbox colors and lawn lengths, now standing red-faced beside 2 handcuffed men. I didn't say a word, just stood beside the cabin railing, letting the moment breathe. One of the deputies approached me. "Mr. Miles, we'll take it from here. You've got every right to press charges for trespassing, impersonation, and property interference." I nodded. "Add harassment to the list. This isn't the first time she's pulled something like this." Karen spun toward me, desperate now. "You don't have to do this. We can settle this privately. I was just trying to control what's not yours," I finished. "You've been doing that to everyone here for years." Her shoulders dropped. She finally looked around and saw what she'd lost. No one defended her. Not one neighbor spoke up. Every phone pointed at her. Every whisper carried her name like a curse. The officer motioned to his team. "Ma'am, you're coming with us. We'll let the county sort the rest." Karen's voice cracked as they guided her toward the patrol car. "This is my community. You can't do this to me." The officer shut the door behind her. "Ma'am, it stopped being your community the moment you started breaking the law." The cruisers rolled off, sirens echoing down the lake road. I stood there a long time, watching the ripples settle against the dock. The beach was mine now, not because I fought for it, but because I refused to back down when someone thought they were above the rules. By the next week, things had completely flipped. The county sent officials to audit the HOA's records, and what they found was worse than anyone expected. Fake maintenance bills, unapproved fines, and even personal checks written out to cash. Every homeowner who'd ever been bullied by Karen suddenly had proof that she'd been running her own private little empire under the HOA's name. When I drove back to the lake that Saturday, the whole community was there, gathered near the dock, murmuring as the county officers boxed up stacks of old paperwork and a laptop from the HOA office. People were angry, but for the first time, they weren't scared.
Mrs. Douglas from next door walked over to me. "You started this, you know," she said quietly. "If you hadn't stood your ground at that cabin, none of us would have dared to question her." I shrugged. All I did was lock my own door. "Sometimes that's all it takes," she replied with a faint smile. One of the investigators came up to me holding a folder. "Mr. Miles, you should see this," he said. Inside was a deed record, the lakefront property line clearly outlined. "This," he said, tapping the paper, "proves your cabin sits outside the HOA boundary. They never had any legal right to claim it." "So," I said slowly, "she was enforcing rules on land that wasn't even theirs?" He nodded. "Exactly. And we've got emails showing she knew that." I looked out toward the water, the late sun gleaming across it. Guess justice catches up eventually. Just then, a few of the neighbors started clapping softly. One, then two, then the whole crowd. Not for me, really, but for the moment. The weight that had hung over this place for years was finally lifting. A county truck backed up, hauling away the private HOA property sign Karen had nailed into the sand years ago. It came out of the ground with one clean pull, leaving behind only the mark of where control used to stand. I walked to the edge of the dock, breathing in the quiet air. "Looks better already," I said under my breath. That night, I lit a lantern by the cabin door and watched the reflection shimmer across my lake. No fines, no fake rules, no one shouting orders. Just peace. But as I sat there, I couldn't help thinking, people like Karen don't vanish. They hide. They wait. They plot. And somehow, I knew this wouldn't be the last time I'd have to remind someone where the real lines were drawn.